Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Coach Scott Fields, host of the Coach Scott Fields Show. And we've had so much fun in the first hour of part one with these coaching legends of the CBA that we just had to continue. And Coach Herb Brown can no longer stay with us, but he had great stories to share. And he just finished telling a story about him grabbing the lanyard of referee Kenny Maurer. But let's continue with part two here, talking about the CBA, the toughness of the players, the quality of coaching, the arenas we played in. Um, Guys, share some of your fondest memories of coaching against each other, and who did you most look forward to coaching against?
What I was getting ready to say a while ago, I think to me the toughest place to win on the road in the CBA was Sioux Falls, South Dakota, especially when Mo Mahone and Paul Wolford were there. They had an unbelievable talent, and Mo did such a great job with his players. And you'd always have to play there. It seemed like we always had to play there Christmas Day night, and they'd have it packed to the rafters, and tough crowd, really a tough crowd.
Okay, hey, now, Russ, you're going to remember this one. So we're playing Russ, who's the head coach of Oklahoma City Cavalry, and our owner, Greg Heineman, always had us over Christmas morning or Christmas noon for a Christmas dinner. Russ Bergman, and by the way, Greg Heineman would have bottles of Opus One and incredible bottles of wine. Russ probably had 2 or 3 bottles himself that day. We go back to Sioux Falls Arena and they kick our ass. And
I may have had 2 or 3 glasses, but I didn't have 2 or 3 bottles.
Oh, you had a lot. You had a lot. Either way, you kicked our ass, and Mo's like, how the hell that boy do that?
Oh, that's good stuff right there.
Well, I think I was the only coach in the CBA who got arrested in the arena after a game.
You got to share that story, Coach.
That's a long
Hey,
story.
Coach, I came very close in Dodge City.
Ooh.
I mean, if you're going to get locked up, and I mean, there you go, Western. They used to lock you up. The sheriff would come and get you, throw you in jail. But I came very close in Dodge City.
Well, I got beaten up also.
Share the stories. Let's hear the stories.
It's a long story. I don't know if you want to hear the details. But anyway, somebody complained. Somebody called me. Eric Musselman called me and said up in Cedar Rapids, George Whitaker, right?
Yeah.
I got the city
George.
right. That he put a full court press on him, up by 20 points. With a minute left in the fourth quarter, had the fourth quarter won. He's complaining about it. So I get up there and we had a shoot around just when they're finishing. So I said, George, Eric called me and he said, oh, no, I would never do that. I would never do that. He did the same thing to me. So I freaked out. I yelled down at him. I said, what are you doing? He said, fuck you. Come down here and do something. So I'm from the Bronx, so I started down there to do something. And one of the refs, I forgot his name, big muscular guy, picked me up and said, I got to throw you out. Okay, all right. So I'm walking down the steps and a little cop comes and grabs me by the arm. I said, let go of me, man. I'm going to the locker room, let go of me. So I go to the locker room and I'm thirsty and there was no water in the locker rooms there. So I go outside where there's a fountain and the game had ended and Whitaker's talking to the media and he says, Charlie should stick to writing poetry.
Oh, shit.
So I went after him. I cocked a fist and I was going to punch him, but I stopped. I said, oh man, this isn't right. All my players show up. And while I was going like this, the little cop grabbed me, threw me on the floor, and he had me on the floor, and my players surrounded him. And they were all going, "Hey, man, let him go, let him go, let him go, let him go." And the cop reaches for his gun. He unbuttons his holster.
Oh,
But I said, "Well, who are you going to shoot?" You know, they're like 9 guys here. How many bullets you got? Which, you know, these big black guys, 6'8", 6'9". How many of these guys are you going to shoot? So he lets me up. We go into the locker room. 5 minutes later, 5 cops bust in, grab me, line me up against the wall and start beating me with their clubs in my thighs, my lower thighs. And I wound up in jail.
oh.
And my players bailed me out.
Yeah,
Charlie,
and
I was his
and
assistant
Elston,
coach.
yeah,
I was there.
Elston Turner tells that story.
I was there. I was the assistant coach for George. What was going on?
Really?
Yes.
So let's get the
That whole
truth,
thing.
Steve.
What's so
Tell the truth.
crazy
Yeah, let's get
is George is telling me afterwards, because he was out doing the announcing. I was the one that told him to full court press you, by the way. No, just kidding. But anyway, he goes, Steve, he said, I saw Charlie coming, but I knew he had my back, so I wasn't worried. And I go, sure.
And George said, "Well, I don't have a full court press." And I met one of his players later at a book signing. He said, "Yeah, he has a full court press, blue or whatever he called it, and he called it to press you."
I remember that whole
I
thing.
got
I
suspended.
don't
for
remember
6
what
years.
happened because I was in the locker room when he was out doing the announcement, and all of a sudden we came out when this whole thing was going on with you and the cops and that whole thing. But yeah, I
And it
remember
was
that
on
very well.
television. They caught part of it on television, and part of it was on national. It was between Christmas and New Year's, and there was nothing going on. So they caught the part of me being ducked into a police car. It's on
Hey,
national.
that's a la Dennis Rodman. Any publicity is good publicity for the
Yeah,
CBA,
well,
right?
I don't know about that.
I had a crazy thing happen when I went to the Tri-Cities. It was actually the owner of the one in Cedar Rapids when I was assistant coach had moved the team there, and he hired me to come in and be the coach, and he was a general manager. Well, halfway through the year, he came in and said, "I'm quitting because I can't work with the other owner that I've sold the team to. So would you take over being general manager and coach for the rest of the year?" So we talked about what was going on. I talked to the other owner who I'd never met. He lived up in Vancouver, Washington. Said, "Okay, we'll work on it." Well, this was an owner that didn't want to pay his bills. So I would take the proceeds from the gate receipts from a game and go deposit into the bank and then try to cut the checks for the players. Well, he'd taken the money out of the bank account and our players hadn't got paid. And so our players showed up with no paychecks. I'm on the phone before the game starts saying, "We're not playing." He said, I said, "I'm sorry, if they don't get paid, they're not playing." So I had to wait until we got notified by the bank that there was enough money put back into the bank account. So the players know they're going to get a check the next day. We went out and played. So that was a horribly rough year to try to be able to be a general manager of a team when the owner never knew if you had any money or not. So,
Oh man, I can
to your
kind of
point, Rick, I had full control of player personnel. I could make all my trades and do everything. He had no idea what was going on with the team.
I have a similar story. When I was coaching the Utah Eagles, now this is against Coach Dalio out here. I think it was 6 days before our opening game at Salt Lake Community College. Our owner backed out and we got absorbed by the league. And so we changed our name from Eagles with an S to Eagles with a Z, got brand new uniforms, had no money, and then we're playing the Minot Skyrockets. That was the head coach, Coach Dalio there. He comes into our facility, and I think they got us down by 22 points. I couldn't even pay the players per diem, and that was just one of those stories that, that's minor league basketball.
That's crazy. Wow.
When I was in Oklahoma City, it was the first year there, the Cavalry. And something happened. I needed to bring in a player. And I had the guy all lined up. He was in St. Louis. And I went to the owner, not the owner, the general manager, who shall not be named. He said, no, we can't afford it. I have to go on a scouting trip. Scouting trips, guys, no, can't tell an X from a no. He's going on a scouting trip. So I didn't bring the player. And I found out that this guy's scouting trip was taking one of the secretaries out to, some vacation spot for a weekend. That was the CBA.
There you go. Coach Dalio, you were in the CBA um, before Isaiah Thomas and then after Isaiah Thomas. What were the differences in the league before and after?
Afterwards, it was for Rockford. I can't comment on the other clubs, but for Rockford, it was the pay. Wayne Tempe had purchased, the team back again and then named me as the coach after Isaiah had bankrupted the league. And I remember he sat with a yellow pad of paper, and the rest of the league, and Wolpert probably knows this better than I do, I think had a budget of $150,000 for your year was what the rate was agreed. And he came to me and says, you have 94,000. Take it or leave it. Anything that you go, and that includes playoffs, anything that you go above that, I'm taking out of your check. So you have 94,000 to make or break, But to go back to the original thing, I got to bring up a point, Scott, and I don't want to take up too much of your time because you're hearing all these great stories. But when you asked for the things that you most liked about the CBA or you most respected or your most memories of, for me personally, was being able, on the one thing, to be able to walk into the hallowed grounds of the Armory, of all the great coaches there and all the great history. For me, no joke, I kissed the floor for the first time I ever went in there because it was just so special of a place. And then for the hardest places to play, for me, it wasn't the arenas. To go along with what the coach said earlier, when you go to Yakima, for me, and I had to face Paul Wolpert, your team had to bring it. It wasn't the stadium or anything else, but you had to bring it and you had to go. And that was the respect that I had. I didn't say it, I'm not going to go kiss Paul's butt, but you had to do that, and looking back, and then we had to go to Bismarck. We had to face Jaeger. Always so tough. You had to bring it every single night. And then we had to go to Idaho, and then we had to finish up going against Keith Smart and Fort Wayne. So you could go through that whole stretch. You get 7-0 or 5-2, you're done. So it was for me, looking back on it now and telling the truth about the matter, I wasn't out to be friends, with these coaches, but the level of respect that I had going into their places was astronomically throughout the stratosphere because, the history and what all you had to do was just so much for me. And I had to bring it. We had to fight, and that was it.
Yeah.
I got a question for maybe Steve, Dan, and Rick, and Paul, whoever. Which was better competition, the G League, D League, whatever, or the CBA in like the golden years, in the late 80s, early 90s? Which had better competition?
Well, it's a different level. In the CBA, back when I coached or we coached and played, it was about winning games. It was about veteran players who didn't want to go overseas, who might, wants to play some more. They knew how to play. They were tough. They were physical. They would do anything to win. And in my opinion, I've coached for 8 years in the D League, G League. The G League has become a 25 and under league of teaching or trying to bring along potential and seeing, when I watch G League games now, I'm sorry, I've been to the showcase here in Vegas. Really, the teams don't really look like they're trying to win. They're just trying to get better or do this or do that or work on their game. But when in the CBA, you tried to frickin' win. And I think that's a big difference now from what that was and what the G League is now today.
And this is Rick and Paul. Paul, you hit on it. I mean, the difference is back then the guys knew how to play and they played and they cared about whether they won or not. Now it's all about, we grow up in the world right now, of course, of, what's me world. I mean, what's about me, what's happening with me, and they all calibrate their stats. I mean, I'm watching my son doing stuff. My youngest son, I'm telling you guys, can really play, but he never gets the freaking chance because he's the ultimate team player. And if you're a team player, unless you're the guard and you control the game, you're screwed. You're totally screwed. And the best thing of All-Star Weekend I just was at, I was an honorary coach, so I got to draft the team that I wanted, and I didn't coach. I mean, Brian from Phoenix, the assistant coach, was coaching for the game, but I would talk to the players and stuff before the game, and I'm so proud of these guys. I said, guys, keep playing well and make the All-Star team for next year, and then go out and have fun and put on a show like they do and screw around. But why don't you show these fans here that you really know how to play this game and go out and play like it means something?
Mhm.
And they did that. And that's why we won, because the guys went out and played. And that was probably the most enjoyable thing for me, to see that some of these young guys are still willing to listen and actually go out and play the game and play it the right way.
Rick, I was there at All-Star, watching the Rising Stars we were at. It's funny because as they had the teams announced and went through the list there, my son-in-law was there, and I turned to him, I said, Rick Barry's team will win. And he goes, how do you know that? He goes, because he'll have them playing defense. He said, I said, you won't let him slide and just show off. He said, I said, he'll make them play real basketball. So my prediction was correct.
Yeah, well, that's what they did. They played, and they did a good job. It wasn't like just let a guy go in and dunk a ball and stuff. They took pride in what they did. And I was very impressed with Cade Cunningham. I mean, the one thing I said to Cade in the last game to win the whole thing, I said, Cade, you got to take control of this game. I said, you're a smart player. You put the ball in the hands of the right people. That's what you have to do now. Take that ball and put it in the hands of the right people to give yourself the best opportunity to win. He did that and got the MVP.
Yeah.
To go back,
Coach, I wanted to expand on what you were talking about. Coach Brian Gates, that's with Phoenix, he is a minor league guy. So I think he kind of gets a feel for that, but you did an outstanding job. And then I want to speak on your son. I saw your son playing that 3-on-3, and you talk about basketball IQ and knowledge of the game and getting it. Hey, your son can play.
Yeah, well, that's why he's focusing, I think, on 3x3 now. Hope to try to get to be Olympian, and missed it this year. He got hurt 2 days before they went to the qualifying tournament, and not having him cost him a chance to go to the Olympics. So anyway, yeah, because I tell people, 3x3, 3x. Hey, listen, you really have to know how to play good 3x3.
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. Coach Clay, you being in the CBA at the office level executive, and then also, coaching, what were some of your favorite takeaways of the CBA being in both seats?
Well, first let me acknowledge the question between the G League and the D League and the CBA, and I would suggest the level of competition, it was not even close, like the old CBA by a landslide, and for a lot of reasons. Number one, there were fewer roster spots in the NBA. There were fewer teams in the CBA, and the European rules were different in those days, where teams most leagues in Europe at that time would only allow 2 foreigners, and that didn't mean 2 Americans. That might mean, if you were a team in Spain, that might mean an American and a Lithuanian. So that there was just nowhere for a lot of these great players to go, and I mean, really, really great players I coached against, Anthony Mason and Mario Ellie and Jeff Askew, and those guys were excellent NBA players and just had no place to go. So in my mind, it's not even close. But a lot of the funny stuff I can tell you from a management standpoint, especially being at the league office level, mostly centered around ownership, and the shenanigans that they would be up to, and the untoward business practices that they had, and the way they thought they were going to get rich quick with these minor league basketball teams. Some of the stuff I saw on that end was ridiculous. And I was in St. Louis for 3 years on the administrative side, and I had the same job. I joke with people, I had the same job as Rod Thorne in the CBA. I was as the vice president of basketball operations, which was a monster job, trying to control everybody. And Russ will probably tell you, I was there when I was there when we had to implement the roster move, the roster move restrictions, because some teams were making 45, 50 roster moves a year, and it was just killing the owners from a financial standpoint and all that kind of stuff. But the things that you would hear them say and the things they tried to do, in the boardroom, I can tell you was never in the best interest of the coaches or the players. It was only in the best interest of the owners. And it was sickening to me. And, I was trying to fight and be an advocate for the players and the coaches and the trainers and, all those people. And, and I'll just kind of pose this question, like, to all you guys that were in the old CBA, and I'm talking about in the 80s, the 70s, 80s, and early, like maybe through the mid 90s, like, what are you guys doing with all your 401k money? Are you spending that money pretty wisely? Like, how did it turn out? Like, there was no pension. Most of the time there was no health insurance. You would hope that the team doctors that got your account for whatever local hospital might sneak you in for an office visit without charging you, but there was none of that stuff. Like, you were truly doing it for the love of the game and the love of coaching, because the financial benefits simply weren't there. They still aren't there. And Charlie, I think it was, I don't know who said it about who should be recognized for what, but I've always believed that the NBA should go back and frankly include some of the CBA coaches and players in the pension program. And it's because they were a feeder system in a big time way. So that's kind of stuff that resonates with me, like what I would see the owners do, and my own owners, who I battled with, like every day about what the right thing to do was, and the shortcomings. And the thing about the promotions came up earlier about, those sorts of things. And Paul, you rightfully pointed out Rich Austin, but some ownership groups wouldn't do that kind of stuff. Like, they just thought people were going to show up and watch the basketball, and you go, they're not showing up just to watch the basketball. They need an entire night of entertainment. So, and like I'd open up, like I saw it from a lot of different angles. I was in the league office. I was in the front office. I was in management. I was an assistant coach. I was a head coach. I was a consultant. I was actually an owner at one point. I convinced Isaiah Thomas to give me a percentage of the Idaho team. And so if any of you guys would like to take that off my hands, I stood still for sale. I had 1% of the Idaho Stampede. So those are kind of the things that I really remember. And then the players, and I thought most of the players were, most of them were phenomenal human beings, but there were some guys that were like, they were tough to be around. One of those where when your eyes would pop open in the morning, you go, oh geez, I gotta go be around this dude. I don't want to see this guy today, but that was part of the deal. But most of the guys were great guys, and they were just trying to make their way like the rest of us were.
Hey, this is Rick. I'd like to ask you guys, if I could. I think one of the best parts of being a coach when you're there is the fact that you don't have no-cut contracts. And if a guy doesn't want to do something, you tell his ass to hit the road. I mean, I did that to an NBA. A guy came from one of the NBA teams there, and he thought his shit didn't stink. And it was unbelievable sometimes the attitude that these kids have. And if somebody's not going to conform to what's best for the team, you have the ability to get rid of them. I think that's the one thing that made it tolerable.
Yeah, but coaches had the same thing. If you lost 3 games in a row in the CBA, no matter who you were coaching, you were you were on the bubble. But the CBA, the good guys, a lot of good guys, and you could really form a relationship with them. You were on bus rides, you ate, with them. You just spent a lot of time with them. And I'm sure all of you guys, there are some players that you still connected with on Facebook or whatever. Those relationships, they last.
What was interesting is
it's funny you say that about players. Like, I'm in contact with a lot of those guys. In my current job, I cannot be in touch with those guys, because a lot of those former players that I had in the day, they have kids now that are prospects. You can't contact them.
So I was going to say that you're right about that. As a player, Charlie, I really became closer to my teammates in the CBA than my NBA teammates, because you spent so much time in van rides and car rides and all trying to get there. And having, I was picked up, and then I had 3 years in the league, and then I got released. Then I went through the CBA route, got picked up again, got a few more years in. But talking to a couple of the coaches assistant coaches in the NBA, they said they really appreciated bringing guys in from the CBA, because those players were hungry, and they appreciated being in the NBA, and they didn't have to put up with all these guys that were spoiled and what expected this and that. They were just happy to be in the NBA, would do, no complaints about a early morning plane ride or whatever else. They loved having the CBA guys that came in because they actually appreciated what they were getting, having gone through the CBA route to get there.
I always thought as coaching in the G League for 8 years, and I always thought, and it'll never happen, and never in a million years, but every NBA player should spend a month in the G League. So they have to get on a regular flight, not a private jet. They have to stay in a hotel where the wind and the snow might be coming under your door because you're on the outside. And you have to take a bus ride every once in a while. And you have to appreciate what you're going to get to when you're flying on a private jet and staying at the Four Seasons. That's never going to happen. But back in the day with the CBA, that was part of the deal. And anybody that made it from the CBA, coach, player, front office person, really appreciated, I know I did, getting up to the next level, and never took it for granted, ever.
Yeah, that would fix a lot of entitlement right there.
And the league office got all the frequent flyer miles for every.
Well, don't you guys agree that in the CBA there was just a culture? I mean, and then there was a toughness because there was that love and passion of the game. Because I mean, that's why you were there. You were not there for the big money. You weren't there for the contract. You were there, with a chip on your shoulder to prove something. And that was coaches, that was players, that was some referees. Do you guys agree with that?
It's amazing nobody ever
about it.
got killed driving a bus up to Toronto in the middle of a storm, or driving from where Cassie Russell coached in Pennsylvania along Route 6.
Lancaster.
It's amazing.
Lancaster.
Lancaster. It's amazing that
When they had a team in Montana, you had
Fatal
to go
car
show.
accident.
Yeah.
I remember Wichita Falls. We would usually have to fly into Dallas and then take a bus from Dallas to Wichita Falls. And I remember this old raggedy bus and this redneck bus driver that kept falling asleep at the wheel as he was driving, and he kept slapping himself to keep himself awake. So it was just
Hey guys, let me tell you something. This is Rick again. I hear you. Unfortunately, I can empathize with you, but man, I'm going to tell you something. The stories I have stuff that happened, in the Global Basketball Association and some of the other, I mean, it's frightening. I mean, some of the stuff that we did, and it really makes you kind of appreciate, the fact that, what I had, I mean, hell, I was just happy to be flying. I mean, I only flew first class like the last 2 years of my career, and these guys now are in charter jets. But man, I'll tell you, you want to get an appreciation for it. 22 hours. And hey, I wish we had a driver. Shit, I was driving a big 14 passenger van for 22 hours. I mean,
But
flying
Scott,
an
that was one of the
airplane.
reasons.
We packed six guys into a little airplane to be able to go, using a guy who was a big fan that I'm still friends with today, his motorhome that we're driving and going towards the Tri-Cities area, and the accelerator gets stuck on the freeway on this thing with my players in there, and the guy's wiping the windshield because the defroster doesn't work. I mean, it's just crazy stuff that went on there. Crazy.
But that helped when you filled out your roster when you went to go sign a player. One of your questions is, to your agent, or when you did your background, is the guy a jerk? If the player's a jerk, knowing that you got to spend all this time, I wasn't going to sign that guy. And I was so happy when I had guys like Marshall Phillips or Teddy Dupay or, player Lawrence Nelson that I could sign year after year after year, knowing that we're on this bus or whatever. I just don't want to be surrounded by, guys that make my life miserable. So that was part of the background. That was part of the stuff that you did when you filled out your roster. If you're talking to an agent or whatever, and you did some background, your agent's going to lie, but you talk to somebody else and they say, oh man, that guy's a total bad guy. You don't want to deal with it. I just didn't sign him.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. The beauty. That's one of the beauties of coaching there. You have that control. You can have that control.
Yeah.
And you keep bringing those guys back. They keep the assholes in check.
Yeah.
That really helped you out. I know that I did the same thing. You get guys who understand the game, understand the league, understand how tough it is. they keep the new guys who are assholes in check, or you just get rid of them.
Barry
Yeah,
Mitchell. Barry
Here's a
Mitchell.
bus ride. Good.
Barry Mitchell in Quad City. He was just a great player, great guy, and he was there constantly. And that was one of those guys you wanted on your team all the time.
I traded for him. It's a long story, but it didn't happen. But here's a bus ride story. I'm Phil's assistant, and we're driving. We have those vans, those big vans, and we had a Saturday night game in Lancaster and a Sunday afternoon game in Albany, and there was a snowstorm. So and there's about 8, 9, 10 inches of snow. And the only way there is to drive Route 6. Any of you guys remember Route 6? It's just one lane this way and one lane that way. And we had to make it. Otherwise the game is forfeit, then that's like a big deal. You can't do that. And Sunday mornings, Phil had this habit of, and Phil was driving. He had this habit of, he'd buy the Sunday Times and do the crossword puzzle on the steering wheel. And he would do it no matter what. So we're the only car on the road, the only vehicle, there are no tracks going either way. And it's like early in the morning. And he's from, North Dakota, Montana. So driving in the snow is like no big deal for him. So he's going at least 50 miles an hour, in 8-inch, 10-inch snow, doing the crossword puzzle. Charlie, what's a 3-letter word for? And all of a sudden we smell weed. So we turn around. I won't mention the player's name, but he changed his middle name to Jump Shot, if that means anything to anybody. And he's smoking a joint. And we said, "What are you doing?" He said, "If I die, I want to die stoned."
Hey guys, I gotta go because there's the thing in my house. It's called Happy Wife, Happy Life. I've already exceeded the time that I'm supposed to do things like this, but being that she's a basketball lady herself and all, she's, she understands it. And the beauty of it is she's always willing to take one for the team, which if you got a wife like that, you're in good shape.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Amen.
Take care. God bless
Thanks,
you.
Coach. Thank you.
All right.
Guys, this is a lot of fun to sit there and reminisce and share stories and talk about, what it was really like, in these CBA days. And I appreciate you guys, sharing stories. What was probably one of the hardest players you ever had to cut?
Chucky Atkins. Yeah.
How did that come about, Coach?
We were so loaded, and I had to let one player go. Ernest Hall, if you remember Ernest Hall, he completely wore him out in training camp. And we talked about it and said, Ernest deserves it and he doesn't. And I knew Chucky was going to be a hell of a player. And anyway, we let him go. And of course, he later was in the NBA.
That's right. Anybody else have stories like that where you fell in love with a guy?
I was just going to say, I had a hard one when I was coaching Rockford. It was a teammate of mine from college, and all the way through playing in my playing career, he worked out with me. He'd gone through some CBA tryouts and gone overseas a little bit, and he called me up when I got the job and just said, "Hey, can I come and give a tryout?" And I said, "Sure." I mean, he was a hardworking guy and a good player. And I really was hoping that he would make the team, and he played well, but he could not make a shot. And so I kept him through the first cut. My sister was saying, "Oh, should we, we're going to keep him?" I said, "Yeah, I need to let him go all the way through." And he could not, to me, it was obvious that he wasn't quite there to get it. So I had to call him in and say, "We kept you, Scott, this is really hard to do." He just was hurt. And I got a letter from him later on, just how hurt he was, how he knew it wasn't me, that it was management, and he thought that, it would be different for him this time. That was just a really hard thing to do that. So it was trying to be neutral, saying, I know I know what he can do, but as a somebody and you're close to, and trying to coach him at the same time is hard.
Some of you guys might know the name Art Long.
Cincinnati.
Played at Cincinnati, 6'9", 250. His nickname was Cockstrong Art Long. He, when the team was in New Orleans, actually, true story, punched a horse that a policeman was standing on and knocked the horse out. But in 2000, we ended up winning a championship. Art was on our team 3/4 of the way through the season. He's leading the league in rebounds, block shots, field goal, second or third in scoring. And we had an episode, we're playing in Connecticut, and he's been off his meds. So he's in a 5-minute period in the locker room. After the game, he went from laughing to crying to severe rage. Talked to my assistant coaches, and I said, we got to get rid of him. And he's the only guy I've ever cut over the phone because I was scared of him.
Good story.
He was that good. He was the best player in the league. Next year, he's playing in the NBA. But we got rid of him 3/4 of the way through the season and still went and won a championship. But I had to get rid of him.
There's a guy whose name I forgot, and I got a funny story also, which I forgot. He was a tryout came. He was about 6'3", and he was like a smaller Charles Barkley. But he played harder all the time than Charles Barkley played. He played defense, and he attacked the boards, and he could jump, and he could challenge. This guy he could have been an all-star. About 2 days before the season started, he was one of our final cuts. He tears an Achilles tendon. Oh, man. Okay. Got to cut him. All right. He comes back the next year. His Achilles is fine. And there's no difference in his play. And he's killing everybody and running all over the place and doing this and this. About 3 days before the season starts, he's on the roster. He tears his other Achilles.
Oh, jeez.
He says, man, I'm never coming back to Albany again for the rest of my life. Here's his funny story. This is a funny story. I think it was Omaha. I don't remember. They were a real bad team. So the game was a laugh from beginning to end. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear some noise. It was like, bleachers. And I turn around, and there's this little kid, maybe a year and a half old, running down the steps, tumbling and running down the steps, and his mother is screaming and screaming. And the kid would have run onto the court and got trampled. So I grabbed the kid, and he's crying and crying. I grabbed the kid, and he stopped crying. And the mother said, oh, fine. If you're fine with this kid on your lap, great. So he sat on my lap for the rest of the game, got a peep out of him. And in the fourth quarter, he peed on me. Peed on my pants.
Now that's a story.
So about, God, I don't know, 20 years later, I was writing for Fox Sports or something. And I had a mailbox column where people would send, questions, and I'd answer them. So I got this mail. I'm the guy that you saved, but I'm in prison. But when I get out of prison, I'll buy you a new pair of pants. The guy still must be in prison.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff.
Only in the CBA.
Oh, yeah.
So, Coach Panaggio, who was the hardest player for you to cut?
Oh, that's I didn't answer that because it was so hard. I cut so many kids or players along the way, and I actually got to be kind of cold-hearted about it. There's and you almost had to make yourself numb before you did it, because you're always going to break somebody's heart every year, and sometimes you're going to end their career. So you almost have to just make yourself numb. Just and just do it. You can't really get emotionally involved in those, in that process. But they're all hard.
Yeah, I mean, as a guy who has been cut, I always took the straightforward approach and I kept it simple, because the worst thing that you can hear when you're sitting in that chair, which I've been in, is, this excuse or that excuse or this, or, I'll help you and whatever. That means nothing to you at that time. I just want the truth. And, cutting guys, when I've cut guys, I've had them cry. I've had them not care. I've had them take off their uniform and throw it at me. I've had a guy try and come over to the desk and fight me. So you get a little bit of everything. But like you said, Paul, I've cut a couple guys that are 6'10", 6'11", built like that I made sure I had at least 2 assistants in the room when I was doing that. But it's really hard to me to cut the guy that is just almost there. The other guys, it's not, but the guys that are almost there, and like I said, being in that spot, I don't want to make it, some little excuse, because I know it's crushing them. But whatever I did, if the guy that was almost close to being there, I would definitely tell him, do this and do that, and you got a shot.
Hey, can I say something? It's not about cutting, but it's about trading. Sometimes if I traded a guy, they were ready to absolutely kill me. And then of course, I would sometimes threaten guys during practice, that weren't given good hustle. I said, you keep that up and you're going to end up in Fargo, North Dakota.
No. I
bet you I'm not the only one that made that threat. I bet you there's some other coaches.
I had a hard time with the guys that I brought in. Somebody got called up on a 10-day, and you bring somebody in to replace them, and they come in and play hard for you, and the guy goes through 2 10 days and then comes back. And then here's somebody you brought in, and they're doing good, but you don't really have a roster spot to cut somebody else you had on it. So it's just kind of hard to bring them in and get their hopes up, and then because the other person didn't make it in the NBA, they come back and you bump them out. That was always a hard one too.
One of the great things about the CBA that's unique to the CBA is we've all had so many times that we call people into the office and you have to cut them. It's that great opportunity when you call them into your office and say, hey, pack your bags. You just got called up.
Yes.
I love doing that.
That was great. That made it all worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so share some of those stories where you got to, be that person who just helped a guy, fulfill a dream. Share one of those stories.
Well, some of you might remember the name Horacio Llamas. He was the first player from Mexico ever to play in the NBA. He played for Coach Mo McCone and I in Sioux Falls. 6'10", 6'11", great hands. Not overly athletic, but could really play and was extremely smart and had what Coach Barry talks about, that basketball IQ. I called him in to our office and I just said to him, hey, you got to go back to the hotel and pack your bags. And he was dumbfounded. The look on his face was like, I said, you just got called up by the Phoenix Suns. And he immediately started crying. And he was, obviously from Mexico. Phoenix has a large Hispanic population, and he played there for 3 or 4 years and had a great career. Things like that just kind of make all the cuts that much, palatable.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
I've found that the agent told the player before the player knew before I knew it. The agent would call him and tell him what was going on and had the flight arranged and everything like that. So they were just telling me.
This kid didn't have one.
Yeah. Hey, fellas, I gotta run, but it's been real, and I really appreciate seeing all you guys again, seeing that you're all in good health and doing well. So, and Scott, and Scott, thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us, my friend.
Yeah. Hey, we gotta get one of your players one of these days.
What's that?
I said we gotta get one of your players one of these days.
Well, you guys are at a really high level, so I got to make sure that I can deliver the right guy. So we're working on it, Clay. All right. Bye now.
Yeah.
Scott,
Wait,
your,
before you
your
go-
question about the call
I'm
up.
sorry, go quick. I gotta go also. Before you go, say hello to Eric for me. Tell him I apologize for grabbing him by the collar and lifting him off the floor. I apologize for that.
Oh, you did that too?
What?
You did that also?
I
I
and
did
then Bill
that. I
called
did
me up
that
the
at
next-
halftime one time. He was on Brooks Steppe and they were going back and forth, which is fine. But then at halftime, he poked him in the chest, and I got to, Eric was looking up at me, and I'm like, "You can't be touching my players."
And then Bill called me the next day and he said, I really admire your fighting spirit. He said, grabbing his kid and going like this.
I played for his dad. I played for Bill in Cleveland, and then having a relationship with Eric and coaching over these years. And what you're talking about, a basketball family.
Oh,
Wow.
Yes. And he got away with playing zones. So I gotta go. Great again. Really, thank you. Scott.
Thanks for being with us,
so
Coach.
great to see all you guys.
Enjoyed it, Charlie.
It's just wonderful.
Great.
I've been after this movie guy to make a film about the CBA, have like a reunion, and do it in Quad Cities, have all the coaches, all the players who want to come and do a whole crazy thing. I think it would be great. So anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Coach Rosen.
Appreciate you, Charlie.
Guys, as we kind of wrap this up, because we've got about 10 minutes, because again, some owners are just business people. They're not basketball people. Share a story with us about an argument that you had with your ownership.
Well, when I was a head coach in Hartford, we had a decent team. We had some good players, and our owner was a businessman. And when he hired me, he said, "Listen, I don't know anything about basketball. I'll do the business. You know about basketball. I'll do that." I said, "That's great," except when some player named Tate George from UConn, just down the road from Hartford, was playing for Dan Panaggio. So my owner had in his mind, if I could get Tate George on our team, we played in a 15,000 seat arena, the hockey arena. If I could get Tate George, who made the shot to get him in the Sweet 16, then I will fill up my arena and I will make money. And I said, let me give Dan a call. And I went back and forth with Dan. We'll trade you this player and a couple draft picks and whatever. And we could, Dan, I would tell him to his face if he was still on, he wanted this better deal and a better deal. So eventually I just cut it off, and my owner called him and made a deal behind my back and traded Chris Gent, 3 other players, and every draft pick for the next year from the 1st to the 5th round for Tate George. And I said, you said you were business and I was basketball. Well, this was business because I'm going to fill up the arena. That was his excuse. Well, first game he comes, we have 10,000 people. I'm like, wow, this is nice. Then the second game it was 5. Then the third game it was 3, and then it was another 500, and that was it for the rest of the year.
Anybody else have just went crazy or ballistic over an owner's decision?
Hey, Scott, I'll tell you one. It wasn't an owner of mine, but because I'm still seeing therapists over my own arguments I had with my own owners. But we had it when I was in the league office. There was an owner in Harrisburg. His name was Van Farber, and the team actually didn't even make it through the whole season because he was just, the guy was a crook. And I would say that to Van. I said it to him all the time. I go, Van, like, you're lying to us about everything you're doing. But in those days, the league was so anxious for some expansion fees, they would just bring in anybody. So one of the things that I had to do with my responsibilities is I had to uphold the owners to what agreements they had made. And one of the things, and Mo and Paul and probably the rest of us left on this call, remember, one of the stipulations they started putting on owners is that you had to live in the market in which your team was. In other words, you couldn't be an absentee owner. So Van was from Long Island. This team was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So he was not complying with anything. And I'd sent you guys, I don't know if you can see your chat, if you know how to look at your chats, but there's like, honest to God, his floor was tilted because it was just laying on the dirt of the thing. And coaches would make, like in those days, remember that, like, and still in the pros, you decide if you're the visiting team, if you're going to go offense or defense in front of your bench for the end of the game. Well, in those days, the coaches were making decisions based on whether you were playing uphill or downhill. I'm not making that up. But one of the things I had to do was I had to go out, and Van was supposed to be moving from Long Island to Harrisburg, and he just kept delaying it. He had excuses after excuses. And I said, all right, Van. And I was in St. Louis, and I said, Van, I'm coming to see you tomorrow, and you're going to show me where you live in Harrisburg. And so I get there, and he's giving me the runaround. I ended up being there for 72 hours. I was supposed to be there for 24. I said, Van, unless you show me, I finally told him, I said, unless you show me where you live, I said, I'm gonna get with the commissioner and the board of directors and the executive committee, and I said, we're gonna pull your franchise before you play a game. So we go to dinner, and finally about 10 o'clock that third night, we go into this residential neighborhood, and we pull up to a house that still has a for sale sign in the yard. And we go in the house, and I said, okay, Van, and the house had never, it was a newly built house, had never been lived in. So there's no furniture, there's not a refrigerator, there's nothing. So we start walking around the house. I said, okay, Van, show me around the house. And we start walking around the house, and he is stumbling all over himself he goes, and here's the master bedroom. And we'd open the door, and it would be a closet. And finally I said, Van, you are freaking lying to me. Like, you are lying. I said, you didn't, like, this is how far the owners would take stuff to try and be a part of the league. It was insane. And for those of you who were around at that time, you remember, like, the league shut them down with about 12, 15 games to play. I mean, he was just a complete crook. Van Farber.
I remember we played in Harrisburg, and I went out before the game to shoot with some players, and we were on the baseline, and the basket was so twisted and tilted that you couldn't see the rim. You couldn't hit them because it wasn't even remotely close. And I remember calling the officials over and saying, this is ridiculous. We can't play on this. And they said, well, that's just the way this court is.
So I have a question for you, Clay.
Yeah.
It seemed like what I saw through the league was that the league would arbitrarily come up with some value for a new franchise, and then some of the owners, the only way they could make money was by selling their team because they were losing. And so there was a lot of teams moving, but it was because they could say, okay, I'm going to sell this team that's, say, in the Tri-Cities to Idaho, and they can buy it cheaper than they can buy a new one for the league. It's almost like the owners went in and kept raising the cost for a new franchise, so the value of their franchises would go up because a new one would cost X amount of dollars. Wasn't really based on how much money you may actually make off of owning the franchises. Was there any of that going on with the owners talking about setting the price for new franchises?
Yeah, it's called collusion, Steve. They were constantly colluding. Everything they did was like by standard labor practices was illegal. Like, everything was illegal. So, but the reality of it is that nobody was making money, so they couldn't sell their teams based on how much they would make. And plus, it's not like they're McDonald's. Like, if you uproot it from Sioux Falls, like if you took Sioux Falls out of Sioux Falls, it wouldn't be Sioux Falls. It wouldn't be the Skyforce anymore. The ownership wouldn't go with it. The people in the community wouldn't go with it. So there was all that kind of stuff. But they absolutely, like, the things that they would come up with in the board meetings, it was like it basically was the people in the league office were just constantly on their heels trying to keep up with the illegalities and the crookedness and the just complete naivety as to how it would work. And I remember your guy, Paul, wasn't his name Brian?
Yeah. I'll tell you, so I was with Hartford when they were the Hartford Hellcats. And then halfway through the year, the 15-person ownership group ran out of money and had no money. So this was just before Christmas. We missed a paycheck. I talked to players into keep playing, and we found Brian, that owner, in Hartford. He was a businessman in Hartford. He had money, willing to take over the debt of the team and pay what they pay the owners and continue on with the year, with the season. I was on that call listening when all the owners, when he agreed to do that and bail out this team and save this team, they all, to a man or woman, said no. They said, no, we don't want him to. And the reason they didn't want him to, because they sold him that franchise for the next year for whatever price it was, so they could share in that money. The same owner, Brian, ran the team next year, but had to buy it as a different team. And me and the players at Christmas were out of a job. And that I was on that call. I heard, and I was dumbfounded. I'm like, here's a guy that's going to take over. He's going to pay all your debt. He's going to make sure we finish the league. And every owner is saying no. I'm like, I was listening. And then, of course, as soon as the last person said no, I had to call my wife and said, well, I'm out of a job. But I remember that, Clay, for sure.
I don't know if you guys remember the commissioner, Mark Lamping. He wasn't around very long. He left to go be the commissioner or the president of the St. Louis Cardinals. But my first board meeting, his first board meeting, we're in St. Louis at the Mark Hotel down by the river, and we come out of the conference room and we're walking back to our office. And Mark was trying to build the league as the League of Dreams. Like the league always had, these things. It was going to be the League of Dreams. And we're walking out of there. Him and Tom Baldessari and I were walking back to our office. He grabbed a beer at the bar, and we were drinking a beer on the way back to our office, about a 3-block walk. And he goes, this isn't the League of Dreams. It's the League of Schemes. I said, well, put it on the letterhead and let's get it cranked out. That's exactly what it was, man. I mean, and I'm not going to name the owners and they weren't all like that, but the majority of them were. And that's why teams moved from place to place so much. I mean, it was insane.
Well, guys, I'll tell you what, this has been so much fun. I appreciate you guys all, hanging in there for 2, entertaining hours of storytelling, and it's just been a lot of fun. So I can't thank you enough for your time and your stories, and again, just some great memories that were shared and relationships that were built for sure.
Nice seeing everybody. Enjoyed it, man.
It was great.
Yeah. Great seeing everybody.
Scott,
See you at the Final Four, Clay.
It can be the bankruptcy.
Say it again.
Give me some tickets for the Final Four when you're in it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. It's
Take
been
care.
been
y'all.
another great edition of the Coach Scott Field Show, and we'll continue to have quality guests and great entertainment in the coming weeks. But thank you so much for being a part of this show and enjoying. So everybody, be safe and be healthy. God bless.